afternoon, folks. My name is Jim Worthen. The show is Worthen One. We're here every Friday night and Friday at 7, Monday at 1, Tuesday and Wednesday at 5 on Channel 17. We're now doing our shows outside because of the reaction to the pandemic, and we're just so glad after 6 months of not being able to do shows that we were able to shoot 1 or 2 a month. So we'll look forward, they'll all be new now, or no more than 1 repeat in a month. So look forward to them. Tell your friends that we're back on the air. I just ran into a neighbor of mine, and he was so glad. He said that he liked our shows, but got tired of seeing the same one 4 or 5 times in 6 months. My guest this afternoon, I've got to remember what we're shooting in the daytime now, is an old political guru friend of mine. We've known each other for 40 years, Steve Frank. Steve, how'd you get into politics?
Well, actually, I got involved in politics because my father owned a laundry in Beverly Hills, and we had a customer that came in on Saturdays when I came in to help my father, and this guy was telling me all about the wonders of politics. This was back in 1960. And
you're pre-teen or teen, right?
I was a teen, and he was telling me about his friend Richard Nixon. And he was actually the campaign manager for Richard Nixon when he ran for Congress, for the Senate, and for president. And he was Nixon's personal attorney, a man by the name of Murray Chotiner. So Chotiner set me up to walk precincts for Nixon in 1960. And then in 62, got me a position as a member of the Speaker's Bureau for Nixon for governor. And in 68, when I got back from Vietnam, he arranged for me to be state chair in California of Youth for Nixon.
Well, you're a veteran, and this is being shot on Veterans Day.
It sure is.
And I was mentioning to somebody that I have a personal feeling for Veterans Day because it was Armistice Day till, 30 years ago?
About then.
And it was the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in the Oregon forest. And my dad was in his 50s when I was born, so he was there in the trenches in France. So I have a special feeling for it.
Well, it's important that we remember the veterans, those who have served our country, those who are first responders who continue to serve our country. That creates the freedom that we have to do a show like this.
Yeah, amen. And that's what Channel 17 is all about, that there's some crazy people on it, probably including me. And so it's free speech, and we're allowed to bring a lot of different ideas on without censorship. Now, we got you up to coming back from Vietnam. You had been active as a volunteer and a super volunteer up till 1960 gubernatorial campaign. What did you do when you came back?
Well, I became state chair of Youth for Nixon. I worked on a series of races in 68 and 69 and 70. In 69, I, along with Bob Dornan, developed the POW MIA bracelet for the prisoners of war missing in action from Vietnam. Worked 7 years full-time on behalf of the prisoners, including setting up over 100 offices around the country, negotiating with the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, the Pathet Lao, and the Khmer Rouge in Asia on behalf of the prisoners and the missing in action, along with meeting with the Communist Party in France and in England.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of negotiating experience.
5 times we've done this show, and I've known you 40 years, at least, and I didn't know that part about the POW negotiations. I know you were involved, but I didn't know that part about you having to deal with all these communists and communist fronts. And
well, I will tell you just one quick story. We met with the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong in Saigon in a place called Camp Davis, and the meeting was set up by Ed Bradley, 60 Minutes. He's the one who made the arrangements, with the agreement being after the meeting we would give him the exclusive on what happened in the meeting. And our goal was the meeting, and we didn't care if we gave an exclusive or not because that wasn't our purpose, so great. So we go into the this Connex, which is a gigantic metal building, and there was a table at the far end, and the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were seated there. Behind them were cross flags of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, and in the middle there was a picture of Ho Chi Minh. And this was in 1973, 74, and I had left Vietnam Labor Day weekend of '68. I was a member of the 1st Infantry Division in Vietnam, and all I could think of when I saw the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong generals, these are the people I missed.
Yeah.
Because I was a machine gunner on helicopters and jeeps, and I missed these two.
So didn't Bradley go on to be co-publisher of the Washington Post? Or
I honestly don't. No, that's a different Bradley.
Oh, okay.
But this was the black journalist.
Oh, yes.
Who was
Okay.
just a great guy.
He was talent.
I will admit to you, I met up with him in a Saigon bar, and he knew who I was, and he made sure he met me and asked what was going on and do I have a story for him. I told him my problem of trying to get a meeting with the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. He says, I could do it, but here's the conditions.
Yeah.
And I immediately accepted conditions, and I and two POW MIA wives went into this Connex, and we spent about an hour and a half talking with the North Vietnamese, Viet Cong, and negotiating with them as to getting the names of the POWs left behind.
Wow. And we still haven't got all of our bodies back of those lost, or even real accounting on some of those left behind.
No. I had a meeting in the cabinet room of the White House before I left for this trip with Henry Kissinger, who was Secretary of State at the time. And he swore to us he would not sign the Paris Peace Accords until he got a full list of the prisoners. Instead, he signed the accords, then asked for the list. And guess what the North Vietnamese Viet Cong said?
What list?
What list? Yeah. And so Kissinger is not one of my favorites.
Yeah. I don't speak his language, so, there's a problem there.
Sell out?
Yeah, right. What was it, 4 years of negotiating in Paris with the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, and the first year was the size of the table.
The size and the shape of the table.
Yeah. I wonder, we've lived it, but I wonder how many of our young people are even being taught anything about this.
I don't think they're being taught about it at all, except that we are colonists. We tried to destroy Asian people, and it was a terrible thing that we did, and we should never defend ourselves again.
Yeah, right. Well, let's speed forward. I think when I first met you, I was an elderly 36-year-old chairman of the California Young Republicans, and people don't understand, the Young Republicans were like the Junior League or other groups that are meant for young people from 18 to 40.
Right.
So I was not the oldest ever, but I was brought back by Paul Manafort and Roger Stone to stop the liberals in the Young Republicans who wanted to embarrass Governor Reagan in his move to be nominated. They wanted to embarrass him with his own Young Republicans turning against him. And we stopped them. I found out that I was dirtier than Manafort and Stone in my tricks, but they worked. And about that time I met you. What were you doing? Was it California Republican Assembly?
Oh.
What act? And of course the state committee, I think you were already on.
Right. I was active with the CRA at the time, but I was also a member of the Young Republicans in the San Fernando Valley.
Ah,
And so I would attend meetings. In my club, the San Fernando Valley Club, was a lady by the name of Maureen Reagan
yeah.
was in the club. And it was Stan Linesberry and just a whole bunch of great people.
Maureen was great. Her brother Michael was a little light, and
I got involved with that, and then I moved on to the CRA as a true activity, and the state Republican Party. I later became an elected officer of the state party, and I served 4 terms, 8 years as parliamentarian for the state party.
I remember that. I remember when I was, most of the time my function with the state party was because of this. And because of my radio show. Even though it was all volunteer, not paid, I got a press pass.
Right.
So I would be sitting in on your committees as a member of the press, a little biased.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we have 2020. It's no longer 1960. We can't use what we did in 1980 or even 2000 as campaign techniques.
All right.
But unfortunately, the political world, at least on the Republican side, is still mired into the 20th century, not the 21st century. And we need to upgrade the state Republican
tell
Party.
me, let's follow that chain of thought about the Republican campaigning, and then we'll get into the specifics of this election. What are the things you're critical of that the party and the consultants are doing?
Well, the Republican Party, you would think, runs the races for Assembly, State, Senate, and Congress.
The state Republican Party. It's
totally untrue.
It's a legal body.
They have nothing to do with Assembly races, State Senate races, or congressional races. Those races are run by the Assembly Caucus, the Senate Caucus, and the Congressional Delegation and the Republican National Congressional Committee. The state party is just a legal fiction that is used because of the election finance laws to run money through legally to pay for things. But they don't raise the money. They're just told how to spend it. They don't tell you if you're a candidate for Assembly here in Santa Barbara, Jim, you need to do this, hire that person. They don't do that because they have no authority to do that. It's the caucuses that do it.
Well, legally, do they have authority to do it?
No, they don't anymore.
Oh, that was taken away.
The whole thing's been taken away by the caucuses.
Okay.
And so
we're just an arm of Citizens United.
Right. So then you're not running campaigns. Since March of 2013, 7.5 years, the Republican Party has not run a voter registration program. So you don't have candidates. You're not running a voter registration program. Oh, I know what you should be doing. We know how corrupt the voter rolls are, right? That there are 440,000 people that got ballots who are either dead or moved out of state. And we don't know how many duplicates beyond that and all sorts of other corruption. We haven't been allowed to have an audit of the illegal aliens that have been registered to vote by the DMV. The Secretary of State refuses to do that. So you would think the state party would be suing to clean up the voting rolls. They haven't done that either. Instead, a private organization, Election Integrity Project CA, has been doing all that work. Where's the Republican Party? They're not making sure the votes are correct. They're not registering voters. They're not running campaigns, but they are raising money. Where's the money going to? Well, the chair of the party, I know you're sitting down for this, is getting paid, well, the Democrat chair of the party is getting paid at $127,500 a year. And he's winning, right? The Republican chair is getting paid $250,000 a year and losing.
50 more than I was signaling.
Yes. Well, you were wrong.
Yeah.
No
But
offense.
she's prettier than the chair of the Democrat Party.
Well, here's the problem. I was on the phone yesterday with somebody because I'm considering running for chair of the state party. And they said to me, well, you know, Steve, what you're up against. And I said, well, what? Well, Jessica, the chair, is 38. She's actually 40, but that's okay. She is cute, and she's a Latino woman. And I thought, okay, what you didn't mention was that she's experienced, capable, or qualified. and who cares what you look like if you could get the job done? And it doesn't matter if you're a cover girl for Vanity Fair if you can't do the job.
Well, particularly given the fact that this isn't going out into the general unwashed public.
Right.
It's going to a little, depending on who registers and everything, less than 3,000 delegates.
There's 1,380 delegates.
Okay.
And it'll be plus or minus that the next time.
I was adding in all the alternates and everything.
They don't vote.
Yeah.
So it's only the people who vote.
1,380. And again, this, and I always have to explain this about the local county Republican Party. The state Republican Party is a legal organ of the state. It has their own legislation. All parties have that. And so, but I was surprised that what would Assembly and Senate caucuses do but take away the power from the party and take it to themselves?
Well, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, I actually like the idea of the caucuses running those races. But what's the purpose of the state party then?
Yeah.
And the answer is, and I put this together in a paper called Transformation of the State Party, what the state party should be doing is working on suing to make sure the voting rolls are correct and that the corruption in the electoral process is gone from California. That's one. Second, it should be doing voter registration, which it hasn't been doing. And third, it should be used by the county committees. The assets and the resources of the state party should be used to build the county committees. I'll give you one instance. State party had claims to have 37,500 volunteers from throughout the state, which is great, except they refused to give those names to the counties. So what good is it to have these volunteers who aren't assigned to anything?
Oh, that's horrible.
And so we need to take those volunteers who sign up with the state, which is great, and give them to two places. One to the counties, and second, after the primaries, to the nominees in those districts where the volunteers come from. Mm-hmm. That's what the party should be doing. And unfortunately, they haven't had these ideas to do it.
So you're going to reform this, we know that. And when is the convention, and will it be, it won't be all Zoom, will it?
Well, the convention allegedly, and I'll tell you the word allegedly, February 19th to 21st. But you want to
canceled the fall convention.
If you want to, yeah, that's true. If you want to deal with the details of this convention, and you're a member of the board of directors of the CRP, you're not being told. No one knows except for the chair and her staff. So here's the problem. By election law, state election law, the organizational convention has to be held in Sacramento County.
Right.
So Sacramento County is closed down. And they opened up the schools this week, which is great. And next week they're closing them. So there's no place to hold a convention in Sacramento County. So what they'll probably do is a Zoom convention of some sort on one hand. Then the question of how do you vote for the officers for the election? Well, we've already, because of the damn panic, not pandemic, but
right.
the damn panic of the governor, we've been closed down. And so they had an election for national committee man and committee woman by ballot, mail ballot. The state party took a ballot on where the delegates stood on the initiatives, mail ballot. So our presumption is they will do a mail ballot with the people running for the different offices.
But you say the state law says that they have to do that, the election of officers.
Out of Sacramento County.
Yeah. The other that you talked about, it doesn't say to endorse somebody you have to meet.
Well, the mail will be sent out of the CRP office, which is in downtown Sacramento. So technically, it's being held in Sacramento County.
Ah. Oh, politics. Let's talk about 2020. That's what everybody wants to know. Now, we are a week and 1 day after the election day. And according to the media and according to his campaign, we elected a guy named Biden, I think.
Some guy in a bunker?
Yeah, we elected him president. Explain why that's wrong.
Well, the media doesn't elect anybody president. The media could say anything they please. They could hide the facts. They could tell lies. It doesn't matter. What does count is the Electoral College. The Electoral College hasn't met. Well, before the Electoral College can meet, the states have to certify the vote. Not a single state has certified the vote yet.
And they have till the 20th of this month
No,
in
they
most
have
states.
till the 11th of December
To certify.
Oh. But here in California, and I don't know about other states, each registrar of voters from the different counties have to get their finals by December 4th to the Secretary of State, who then 1 week later, or by 1 week later, December 11th, will certify the election for Assembly, State Senate, Congress, the ballot measures, as well as the presidential vote.
And that's basically a similar pattern, but with the December 12th meeting of the electors, that's the only thing that is federalized completely.
Right. And if there is no, here's the problem, we know that there's a whole series of lawsuits in Nevada, in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, a whole bunch of fraud in Pennsylvania. They got 9,000 votes in Pennsylvania that were postmarked before the absentee ballots were sent out. How does that happen?
And
they got 80,000 votes, absentee ballots, the day after they sent it out. So they sent it out on one day, and the next day they came back before the people even got them in the mail. That's 80,000 votes. And so you have all these discrepancies. And so there's lawsuits about this. And Justice one of the justices, Scalia, has told the Pennsylvania that you can't count any of the votes that came in after the close of the polls on 8 o'clock. You have to separate them until the Supreme Court can hear the case. So we don't know when this will be heard. So what could happen, there may not be 270 votes for anybody on December 12th or on January 12th. Well, under the Constitution, if there's no electoral vote of 270, it could go to the Congress.
House of Representatives.
House of Representatives. House of Representatives elects the president, and the Senate elects the vice president.
I'd missed that part, yeah.
And if there's no, still nothing, until everything is settled, the President of the United States is temporary, who is the Speaker of the House.
Well, the House will settle it quickly. I've told this story to many people. I said, Nancy Pelosi will be she has a majority in the House, and she'll elect Biden. It isn't done that way. I tell people, Montana has one vote. California has one vote in the election of the president in Congress.
And as I understand it, the Republicans have between 26 and 28 of the state delegations.
Right. They had 26 going into yesterday, and they have at least 27. They may have 28.
Right.
And the Democrats, and there's, I don't know if it still stands, but for a time there were two that were split, and they don't get to vote.
That's
unless
correct.
they have both houses.
Right.
So the Democrat, I mean, it'd be an easy Trump victory in the House.
Yeah.
And that's the Constitution. And we either
But-
abide by it or we have no republic anymore.
But here in California, as of this date, this is where we stand. The Republican Party has won 2 seats, apparently. Young
the
Kim
House.
in the House, Young Kim and Michelle Steele in Orange County. In my district, the 25th, Mike Garcia, as of this morning, was 159 votes ahead with a minimum of 10,000 more votes to be counted. That's kind of tight. Then you have Valadeo up in the Central Valley, the 21st.
Former congressman.
A former congressman, now running against the guy who defeated him. And he was ahead last night by about 4,600 votes.
Yeah.
But there are tens of thousands of votes in his district to be counted.
Well, that was one that Valadeo lost to Cox last time by
under 1,000 votes.
By harvesting. The Democrats,
yeah, harvesting.
He was ahead by 10,000 votes on election night, and all of a sudden he lost by 3,000.
Right. And so then on the Sacramento side, we lost 2 state Senate seats, Morlock and Ling Chang out of Orange County. And that's really interesting because Morlock and Chang lost while the congressional districts above them, Steele and Young Kim, won. Who ran Steele and Kim's race? Congressional committee. Who ran the race for the state Senate? The Senate caucus. Then there are 2 other Senate caucus seats, Senate seats, Wilk and Bogue, who appear to be ahead, one by 12,000, one by 11,000, and they appear to have saved those seats.
Well, what's super bad about that is only half the Senate was, 20 seats were up for election. So to lose 2 or 4.
Well, we lost 2, we lost 10%. We're now down to 9 members of the state Senate out of 40. And on the Assembly side, we're up to 18 out of 80. So the Democrats still have a supermajority. But the good news is, and there is good news, when you look at the propositions, the voters said no to messing around with Prop 13 by defeating Prop 15, split roll. They said no to government-sponsored affirmative action, which is discrimination. We said no to unions telling workers they have to join a union to work, that workers have free choice in this state, Proposition 22. And the voters said we want cash bail. We want to keep criminals in jail unless they can pay to get out. We don't want them on our streets. So on the ballot side, the initiative side, we were very conservative. On the candidate side, we never connected our candidates to the values of the voters on the proposition side. And that's the disconnect that we need to fix.
Locally here in Santa Barbara, we have several members of our county committee who have seen some of the flaws that you point out, and they want to spend money and time branding the party. That's what you're talking about, being the party to preserve Proposition 13, being the party against criminals, being out on the street, being the party for small independent contractors. And we began spending some money on that branding belatedly in the middle of trying to help our candidates.
What I hear from you, and it's correct, we should be branding ourselves as the party of the people, the party of the workers. That's what Trump has done.
We ran a series of ads. I helped write them, and one part was register Republican, vote Republican. We are for your family, your businesses, and your businesses, your jobs, and your family values. Bang.
And that's the type of thing that we need to do. And again, the state party can be a very important part of helping counties do that.
Yeah.
Create templates for that, and then they make it localized.
And you listen carefully and know demographics, you know that very line speaks probably more to the Hispanic voter and to the black voter than it does to the white middle class.
Yeah.
They're worried about businesses and family values. The as we go forward, in a frank administration of the Republican Central Committee, you're wanting to take it in a direction that has been ignored, fighting in court.
Of course, you have to.
No, Democrats do that. We don't.
You know,
I mean, we do it after post-election, but we don't do it through the whole year.
Let me put it differently. After the crime is committed, then we decide to sue.
Yeah.
Why haven't we just sued before the crime's committed?
Well, a federal judge ordered L.A. County to purge 1 million bad registrations.
Yep.
But nobody seems to have forced the county to do it.
Oh, but you only have half the story. Not only didn't the state party not force them to do that, but as part of that court order, the court ordered the Secretary of State Padilla to do the same thing in the 57 other counties for a total of 3 million to be purged, and nothing happened. And so we have a court order that the Republican Party has refused to try to enforce.
Well, and as an old campaign manager, which we both have been, the travesty in this is those 3 million people got the counties had to send them all literature and ballots and the government information. But every candidate was sending 2 or 3 pieces of mail to them at an extreme cost in campaigning, in dealing with dead wood.
Yeah.
And
literally dead wood.
Yeah, yeah. And I told the story till last year. I had moved up to Washington State for about 5 years back 20 years ago. Still had a home here, but I was spending more time there than here because of my family there. I registered to vote. I voted. I didn't realize this, but last election cycle, 18, my daughter called me. She says, "We keep getting your ballot here," because I'd signed up to be a mail ballot, and they've been doing it long enough that you would think they were doing it right. And I said, "Don't vote it. Don't be a Democrat. Throw it away." And I went into Jack Holland's office, our county clerk here, and I said, "Hey, Washington doesn't know I've been registered here for the last 20 years. I was registered there 25 years ago." They didn't get one this time. So somebody got the message, or they ran out of
look at what
paper.
you had to do to get that message across. You had to personally drive down to the Registrar of Voters office and to get them to notice. That everybody's not going to do that. Everybody say, "Who cares?"
How about a prediction? I had planned to make a prediction that I was going to tell you about, and I told everyone, and I'm going to do a little mea culpa at the end of our show here. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, and I got all the excuses in the world. I thought it was a red tide. I even predicted as many as 44 new congressional Republicans instead of 12. I predicted a pickup of 2 U.S. Senate seats. I was so far off that I feel stupid. There's reasons. The data, as you pointed out, I probably was dealing with the 2000 mindset as a procrastinator. And the data, the input that we're getting now, that I use the old templates on, is so different. Are we going to end up with mail ballots, electrical ballots, electronic ballots? Is there any chance of us, as France has, going back to the old-fashioned, you vote on election day in person?
Well, to begin with, if it wasn't for the corruption of Pennsylvania, we would have won 2 more congressional seats. If it wasn't for the corruption of the state of Michigan, we would have won 1 more U.S. Senate seat. That's still up in the air because of the corruption.
In Minnesota.
And we would have won seats there. And so your prediction, while off, wasn't that far off if it wasn't for the corruption. How do you predict the effect of corruption, not of 10 or 15 ballots, but millions of ballots? 440,000 just in our state alone. The 80,000 in Pennsylvania that came in the day after they were mailed out, and the 9,000 that came in before they were mailed out. How do you get the mail in? So, but here in California, I'm very sad to say, Assemblyman Mark Berman is going to be introducing a bill to make permanent an all-mail ballot situation, just as we had this time. Now, the problem with that is, of course, unless you have accurate voting rolls, who cares? Now, what happens when you have all this corruption, and everybody knows it? No one's denying the corruption and the fraud and the incompetence. You call that voter suppression. In 2022, it's going to be very difficult to get people out to vote because they already know the jig is up and the fix is in. So why should they vote? And unless the Republican Party here in California becomes active and aggressive to stop it, we're going to have a hard time in 2022 to get our voters out to the polls.
Well, we're going to have a couple of more of these interviews before then. I'm looking forward to seeing how you do as the new chairman of the Republican Party.
Well, let's hope I win it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm better prediction than my last. How do people get in touch with you?
They can email me at Stephen Frank, StephenFrank, at sbcglobal.net. Stephen Frank at sbcglobal.net.
And with only 1,300 delegates that can vote for or against you, you still need volunteers. You still need a crew. Those people need to be contacted. They need to be campaigned. They need to get commitments from them. The biggest thing that I learned in Sacramento, working in the legislature and becoming chairman of the California Young Republicans, is you've got to say, Steve, will you give me your vote? Steve, you know, your word is your bond, and you're dead meat if you go back on it. Now, I'm counting on you. And it always worked. You know.
It does. You have to be direct with people. I sat down with a major person in the Republican Party last week for lunch, and I just had to pull up my gut and say, would you endorse me? Will you donate to my campaign? And I said that without any hesitation, full confidence, and I got half of what I wanted, which was good, and so I was pleased with that. But,
we won't ask which half.
But we had to have the ask.
Steve, you've got to go because you're going to be doing a radio show and meetings tonight, and I'll go through my confessions and mea culpa. Thank you so much.
Jim, thank you.
Welcome back, folks. Our guest for the major portion of the show, Steve Franks, as we said, had to leave. And so you're going to get stuck with me, and starting with my confession of political illiteracy. As I mentioned at the end of the segment with Steve, I was going around. I have people who call me. I have a dear friend in Utah who calls me. Literally every day is the last 2 weeks of the campaign. I have people calling me. I have reporters asking, what's going to happen, Jim? The reason, to be fair, was that I have two major scalps in my political prediction belt, where they keep the scalps, I think is on your belt. And I first was 1994, when I predicted that the Republicans, for the first time in, I think it was 40 years, would win 54 new seats in the House of Representatives, and Newt Gingrich would be the Speaker. The only other person to make that prediction was at least on tape where you could see it, was Newt Gingrich. Then, 4 years ago, I even won $100 from Mike Stoker. Well, we can't bet. He didn't pay me, so it's not, I predicted that Donald Trump, when everybody knew he was going to lose on election night, would win by 306 electoral votes. So, pride comes before the fall. All the hubris and narcissism in my bonnet couldn't help me telling everybody that would listen, it's not only a red wave, it's a red tidal wave. And we're going to have to worry about the violence that will be the blue tsunami the next day as the Democrats burn our cities. By the way, in that regard, I've pointed out again that our president of peace, the president who has not got us into a war, and in fact got us out of many predicted wars. 5-6 years ago, everybody thought we'd be at some sort of engagement militarily with Iran and with North Korea. Hopefully not nuclear, but a shooting war where young men died, young women died. That didn't happen. And again, he's, in the way this election's been handled, the cities aren't burning. They boarded up. The police departments were ready the day afterwards for the riots by the losing party. Well, tentatively, the Republicans lost so far. You didn't see Republicans burning buildings. The police weren't worried about Republicans rioting. Our Trump supporters, those horrible, I won't repeat the names we've been called, but they have to do with terrible political violence around the world. No, they were worried about the Democrats, and by Donald Trump finessing them and not winning a red tide victory, he saved our cities. And hopefully he'll be president. But it will have all been spread out over a constitutional timetable. As I said, boy, am I stupid. I'll give you one part about this constitutional timetable we're going through, and that is that, let me save that till after I finish my mea culpa. The reason I believe, as I alluded to earlier, is that I'm an old line politician. I've run campaigns. I have created in my own polls and been accurate in them. But show you the difference, when I was creating polls locally, we took a phone book. I would call these pages 1 through 20 to a caller. Take the fourth name from the bottom and keep going up, and then ask them these 7 questions. And boy, was I accurate. And in the 10 times I did it. But gee, we don't have phone books now. People don't have hard phones. You know, this was campaigning in the 70s, 60s. And so it's, I was a mere child, but very advanced politically. So that has changed. I began to watch polls, and in the last 10, 15 years that were now under the modern polling systems. And I would watch and see how far off their sample was, because the main thing is getting and I always had to adjust my polls even back then, getting the percent of Republicans, the percent of Democrats, the percent of non-party oriented. When Fox has been one of the conservative villains, when I heard that Fox was running 38% Democrat sample and Republicans at 28. I knew immediately, because the sample in their universe, in the nation, should have been even in party registration and party voting. And so I just kept taking 10 points off of anything Fox said. And we found that to be true because the election came out pretty much even. And so bad data, just like with elections, politics, issues, and climate change, the one thing that we should remember from the 50s and 60s and 70s is, if you're doing it all with computers, garbage in, garbage out, you're going to get an answer depending on what you put in. And if you put bad data in, you're going to get terrible answers. And that's what's been happening in climate change. You remember, everybody wants to worry about the future. How about looking at the last 20 years and seeing how, if we're under 12 feet of water in lower Santa Barbara, or if the polar caps have melted completely. You know, things that Al Gore and the computer scientists predicted, or those who believe them. They can't even tell us what the weather's going to be in 2 days. How are they going to tell us what it's going to be in 2 years or 20 years? So that's what happened in my political predictions. I relied on my old ability to adjust the new data, and I've got to go back to school because I sure was way off. Now, in looking at the election, everybody is pointing to the fraud, and everybody is saying, well, it doesn't matter if you win. The latest is if you win by 10,000 votes and you can only prove fraud in 5,000 cases, the courts aren't going to pay any attention to it because it isn't going to change the outcome. Well, and why can't we get it over? Why can't Trump concede? Wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago, that Al Gore didn't concede, I think, till the Supreme Court ruled. The recount in one state, in really 3 counties of one state, drug on through court cases, went to the Supreme Court twice, went to the state Supreme Court in Florida, and it drug on for 38 days. Not a week, 38 days. So don't tell Trump or those who support him or the lawyers, get it over with, give up. That's not the way the system works. Now, the way the system works is that we have a constitutional republic, not a democracy. If we had a democracy, we could have done it on the popular vote. By the way, I think the popular vote is going to be about 4 to 5 million to Biden's favor. Well, California gave him 4 to 5 million, period, right there. That means they were even in the rest of the country. And that's not saying that he probably won. If you give California to Trump, he won in New York State. So that's the reason we have a republic. We have a republic because our founding fathers feared mob rule, feared a democracy. We are a republic. Now, first stage is this legal and counting the votes to make sure that we count all legal votes, every legal vote. Because you see, if I vote legally, but somebody else votes their dead mother, they've stolen my vote. And in the Al Gore case, in the Florida case, the reason the court intervened was the Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution, that I, as a voter, need to have equal protection under the law. They can't steal my vote by using illegal votes. And that's where it's going to come down. As I say, the big problem with each state will be, is the margin of victory so much that the Equal Protection Clause wouldn't have changed it anyway. But constitutionally, that's where, when everybody screams at the Supreme Court, shouldn't be making these rules. Two things. Even though we vote as states, we vote as counties. In the presidency and Congress, it's a federal election. No, the Supreme Court can't decide whether or not somebody should be mayor of our city. They may under the Equal Protection Clause, but they are not. It is not a federal issue. It only becomes a civil rights issue then, on the right to vote. So those court cases are going to go on. Certification, depending on the county, state, but by the Electoral College will be in the first week of December, and the vote in the Electoral College will be on the 12th. Well, if there are states that cannot certify, their electors cannot say that they've finished the count, there aren't court cases blocking them, they don't get electors. And that means we end up with a non-electoral college vote. Again, as we had to remember about Al Gore, twice in our history, our president has been elected by Congress. In other words, the vote in the states, the electors from the states could not come to a decision, and it goes to the House of Representatives. And as Steve reminded me, to the Senate for the vice president. Now, don't panic. Nancy Pelosi will have no ability to manipulate her membership or the 435 members of Congress. That's done because the Constitution will speak. And as I like to say, Montana gets one vote, California gets one vote. We are a republic. And those votes, by the way, are not controlled even by the congressional delegations of those states. They're controlled by the legislatures of those states. And you have to have unanimity. In other words, if bicameral, two houses, they have to be of the same mind. In this case, it's a partisan issue, the same party. If they aren't, if they have one house controlled by the Republicans, one house controlled by the Democrats, they don't get a vote in Congress even. Now, so right now, in the old Congress, there would be 26 states that could vote Republican. In other words, both houses of the legislature, it's hard to believe being in California, but both houses of the legislature in 26 states are controlled by the Republican Party. In this election, it went for sure to 27, and maybe 28 when it's all done. The Republicans picked up seats in all the legislatures across the country. And not all, most. California didn't. And then the Democrats had 22. And in the old Congress, it was 26, 22, and 2 who couldn't vote because they had one house of each party. So if it gets there, Donald Trump's our president. Constitutionally, going through the whole constitutional system. Now, I was born in Illinois. My parents, my family were there for, my parents for 40 to 50 years, and my great-great-great-grandparents were there for 150 years. Used to have Southern Illinois Republican, Northern Illinois Democrat. And there was a man named Daley, who was the mayor of Chicago. And Mayor Daley's ghost has been running around to Philadelphia, Detroit, Atlanta, and because the way it works in Mayor Daley's politics is they get the popular vote and they see how far the Republican, Southern Illinois, is ahead. And the ghost of Mayor Daley says, how many votes do we need to win? And weeks after the election, they find those dead people, those phony ballots to win. And that's happening in 5 or 6 of our major metropolitan areas in 5 or 6 states that are very close. So just always remember that the Democrats haven't changed that much, or the ghost of Mayor Daley is telling them what to do. I want to thank you for listening to me tonight. It's a new experience, and I'm not sure how, it's a funny thing. I hate to tell people this, but I have very seldom watched my shows. I'm there, I do it, and they say, well, what do you think of it? And I said, well, everybody tells me it worked, so I'll believe them. This last 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to have to watch to see how really stupid I looked. And as I tell people in bureaucracies when I'm dealing with them, and I'll tell you, I say, I need help. My name's stupid. And I'll tell my audience the same thing. I need help. You're great being there. But just remember, I'm stupid. God bless you. God bless our system. And God bless America.